Let me start with something simple. I built a small AgriTech startup prototype. It takes a field, pulls satellite data, checks the weather, calculates a score, and tells you if something is actually growing there or not. Now, here's the interesting part. I didn't start this because I'm a farmer. I didn't even start this because I deeply understand agriculture. I started this because an AI basically told me, hey, agri startups might be interesting. And I took it personally. So I decided to treat it like a challenge. Not let's research for months, but more like let's build something real and see what breaks. And honestly, a lot of things broke. But that's where it gets interesting. The goal was simple: take a piece of land, get real data about it, calculate a risk score, expose it through an API. Sounds like a weekend project, right? Yeah, not really. I started from zero, literally an empty folder and a rough roadmap. Then I built a stack around it. PostGIS for storing field geometry, Python for pulling data and calculating scores, PHP for API, Docker to glue everything together. One command. And the whole system runs. At least that was the idea. The first version used fake data, fake NDVI, fake weather, fake everything. And that was actually the right move. Because before you connect satellites, APIs, authentication, rate limits, you need to prove that the pipeline itself makes sense. And it did. Field data, score API. That loop worked. Then I replaced fake data with real integrations. Weather was easy. Open-Meteo. No API key drama. Clean responses. Works out of the box. Satellite data was a different story. Sentinel Hub. OAuth. Weird payloads. Random 400 errors. Wrong request formats. At some point, I felt like I was not building a startup, but negotiating with a very passive aggressive satellite. But eventually it worked. And that moment matters because suddenly your output is not NDVI 0.73 because I said so. It becomes NDVI 0.045 temperature, 2 degrees, rain 1.4. That looks real. That feels real. And most importantly, you can trust it a little bit more. At that point, I realized something important. The score itself is not the product. Just returning a number is useless. Nobody cares about 0.48 risk. What people actually want is why? What does it mean? What should I do? So I added recommendations. Simple, rule based, nothing fancy. But suddenly the system could say, this field shows weak vegetation signal. Check it in the next 48 hours. Compare with previous observations. And that small change turned the MVP from a technical demo into something you can actually show to a human. Somewhere around this point, if you like this kind of real built-in public experiments, drop a like and subscribe. Because this is exactly what this channel is about. Not theory, not 10 startup ideas you should try, but actually building things and seeing what survives. Now, here comes a fun twist. Originally, I wanted to build this for Ukraine. Makes sense, right? But reality hit pretty fast. A lot of registries are not easily accessible right now. Some are restricted, some are not designed for open integration. So instead of forcing it, I pivoted. And AI actually suggested something interesting. Try Estonia. And that worked. Not perfectly, but enough. I found a public cadastral API. You can input a cadastral number and get back geometry, area, metadata, which means no manual drawing, no guessing boundaries, no messy UI hacks. Just enter number, get parcel, score it. And that's where the project became something more than a toy. Because now you have real land, real data, real score, real explanation. That's already a vertical slice. Now, let's zoom out a bit. Does this actually make sense as a startup? Short answer, partially. Here's the thing. Simple scoring alone is weak. A number without context is just noise. Real value comes from historical data crop selection patterns over time comparisons between fields. Basically, not what is the score now, but what does this mean over time. But even at this early stage, there is already one very practical use case. You can quickly check, is something growing here or not? And that's surprisingly powerful because it turns vague land into something observable. Now, let me zoom out even more. This whole thing is part of a bigger pattern I've been exploring: building small real digital assets. Sometimes it's a tool, Sometimes it's a micro SaaS. Sometimes it's just an experiment that teaches something valuable. The idea is simple: find something small, build it fast, connect real data, see if it has life. And most importantly, don't burn months before reality hits you. And yeah, I'll be honest. Part of the reason I even care about agri right now is very personal. I have this idea: maybe in 10 years, I'll have half a hectare of vineyard somewhere, grow grapes, make wine, nothing industrial, just something real. So maybe thinking about agri now is not a bad long term investment. But coming back to startups, if I had to be brutally honest, the opportunity is not in apps for farmers, it's in risk finance, compliance, data infrastructure. The closer you are to money and decisions, the stronger the product. So, where does this MVP sit? Right in the middle. Not useless, not a full product, but a foundation. From here, it can go in different directions: better scoring, historical tracking, multi country parcel, import financial integrations, compliance layer. Or it can die. And that's also fine, because the real win here is not the product, it's the speed of validation. From idea to working system, to real data, to real limitations. And that's the question I want to throw back to you. Do you think something like this actually has a future? Not as a demo, not as a cool tool, but as a real business. Would you build on top of something like this? Or would you pivot completely?